In The Handler by L.T. Ryan and C.R. Gray, former K9 officer Maddie Castle is grappling with the aftermath of a devastating injury that ended her law enforcement career and claimed the life of her K9 partner. Now working as a private investigator and battling addiction, Maddie is drawn back into the world she left behind when a fellow K9 handler is murdered. Tasked with rehabilitating the fallen officer's traumatized dog, Tempest, Maddie finds herself entangled in a complex web of corruption and danger. As she investigates the case, she uncovers a conspiracy that reaches deep into the city's criminal underworld and law enforcement, forcing her to confront her own demons and risk everything to seek. Chapter 1: The Scarred Heroine Returns. Rain fell like penance from a low, bruised sky, soaking the cracked sidewalks of East Haven in a grim, constant rhythm. Maddie Castle stood beneath the overhang of a run-down liquor store, cigarette trembling between her fingers, the glow of its tip casting faint shadows across the deep scar slicing through her left eyebrow. The storm wasn't just in the sky. It was inside her too. It always was. The ache in her leg flared with the weather, a brutal reminder of the ambush that ended her career and Tempest's life. Her old K9 partner hadn't even had time to bark before the explosion ripped through the alley. Maddie remembered the sound more than anything, the silence after the blast and the ringing in her ears that followed, as though the universe itself had gone quiet out of respect. That silence still chased her, even now. She ground the cigarette out under her heel and pulled the frayed hood of her coat over her cropped hair. She hated this part of the city, too familiar, too close to what she'd lost. But she needed the pills. And she needed the pills because she needed to sleep, or feel nothing, or both. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it at first, but it buzzed again, persistent. Maddie exhaled, pulled it free, and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered, then without knowing why, maybe because she was too tired to resist anything anymore, she answered, "Castle." Her voice was rough, like gravel soaked in whiskey, a beat of silence. Then, "Maddie, it's Captain Briggs." Her stomach clenched at the name. She hadn't heard from Briggs in almost a year, not since the department signed the papers confirming her medical retirement. She wasn't supposed to be part of that world anymore. "I'm not coming back," she said flatly. "I'm not asking you to." Another pause. Rain tapped rhythmically on the awning above her like a metronome. "There's been a murder," he continued. "Jake Holloway. He's dead." The name hit her like a gut punch. Jake had been more than a colleague. They'd trained together, laughed together. He was one of the few who hadn't turned his back on her after the blast. "How?" she asked, though part of her already knew. In their line of work, there were only so many ways to go. "Execution style," Briggs said. "And Maddie, it wasn't clean. Whoever did it wanted it messy, wanted it found." She leaned against the graffitied brick wall behind her, heart pounding. "Why are you calling me?" "Because his K9 survived. The dog's still at the scene. Nobody can get near him. I thought, maybe you could help." Maddie closed her eyes. A part of her wanted to say no, to crawl back into the half-life she'd built in the shadows. But that other part, the part they'd trained into her, the part that still whispered orders in her head when things went quiet, stood up straighter. "I'll be there in an hour," she said, hanging up before he could thank her. She dropped the rest of her cigarettes into the storm drain and limped toward her car. As she slid into the driver's seat of her battered old SUV, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, tired eyes, a permanent scowl, and the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much and lost more. Maddie Castle was done running, and something told her the ghosts were just getting started. Chapter 2: Death of a Friend, Echoes of a Past. The crime scene had already gone cold, but Maddie felt the heat of it the moment she stepped from her vehicle. It wasn't the kind of heat you measured with a thermometer. It was the stifling, invisible pressure of violence left behind, lingering in the air like smoke after a fire. The alley behind the shuttered hardware store was cordoned off with yellow tape that fluttered in the breeze like a warning. Her boots crunched over broken glass as she limped forward, the ache in her leg forgotten in the rush of returning adrenaline. A younger officer, one she didn't recognize, glanced up at her approach, brow furrowed. Maddie didn't offer a badge. She didn't need to. The way she moved, the way she scanned the scene, it was enough. "Castle," said a familiar voice. Captain Briggs stood at the alley's mouth, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets, face carved from worry and fatigue. His hair had gone greyer since she last saw him, and the creases beside his eyes had deepened. He gave her a small nod, respectful, careful, as if she might shatter under the weight of this moment. She wouldn't. "I need to see him," Maddie said. Briggs led her past the tape. The alley narrowed, darkened by the looming walls of buildings that hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades. The body had already been removed, but the blood remained. A dark spatter on the concrete, a signature. She stared at the spot where Jake had fallen. Her breath caught in her throat. He'd been positioned sitting up, back against the wall, arms limp at his sides. No defensive wounds. One shot to the head. Execution. Personal. "What the hell was he doing here?" she asked quietly. Briggs shook his head. Off the grid, no official case, no backup, no comms. Just showed up here last night. Witness said they heard a struggle, then silence. When we found him this morning, his gun was still holstered. Maddie crouched by the bloodstain, her fingers hovering inches above it. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She could see it play out, Jake walking into a trap, maybe trusting someone he shouldn't have. Something else caught her attention. Claw marks on the brick wall. High, deep. The kind of panic that came from a cornered animal. "Where's the dog?" she asked. "Still in the van," Briggs said. "We had to sedate him just to transport. He's not letting anyone near him. Nearly took off Officer Tran's hand." Maddie stood and looked back at the alley's mouth. "What was Jake working on?" Briggs hesitated. "That's just it. We don't know. No case files, no reports. He wiped his department tablet clean last week. Personal phones missing. Only thing we found was a torn notebook page in his jacket with one word, handler." A chill crept up Maddie's spine. "That's what they used to call me, in training, before." "Yeah, we thought that might mean something." The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy. Maddie looked around the alley one last time. Something was wrong. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't even just a hit. It was a message. And Jake hadn't just been a friend. He'd been the last person who still believed she had something left to fight for. Now he was gone. "Take me to the dog," she said. Briggs nodded, and together they walked to the unmarked cruiser where Tempest waited. Maddie's past was no longer behind her. It was waiting in the dark. "Would you like to dog with secrets?" The cruiser's back compartment was dark, save for the blinking red of the sedative monitor clipped to the crate. Maddie approached slowly, her footsteps deliberate, hands open at her sides as though crossing into sacred ground. Inside, the crate held a coiled shape, muscles taut, fur bristled, eyes like twin shards of broken amber. Tempest. The moment her scent hit him, the dog growled, low, guttural, not threatening but confused, mournful. Maddie crouched beside the crate, eye level now, and looked into the eyes of the creature Jake had trusted with his life. Tempest was leaner than she remembered, battle-tested, and tense to the point of vibrating. "He's not going to hurt you," Briggs said behind her, but Maddie lifted one hand without turning. "He's not the one I'm worried about." There was something wrong in Tempest's gaze, something more than grief. It wasn't just trauma from watching his handler die. It was recognition. As if the dog knew something she didn't, something he couldn't express with words, only wariness. "You remember me, don't you?" she said quietly. His growl faded. His ears flicked forward. "I know," she whispered. "They took him from you, like they took mine from me." She gently unlatched the crate. Briggs stiffened. "Castle, you sure?" The door creaked open. Tempest didn't bolt. He stepped out slowly, paws hitting the asphalt like weighted stone, and came to a stop just inches from Maddie's injured leg. His nose twitched. Then he sat, still watching her, breathing hard through his nose. That's when Maddie saw it, something beneath the edge of his collar. "Hold still, buddy," she murmured, sliding her fingers carefully beneath the thick leather strap. Her fingers brushed a metal tag, but not the kind you'd expect. It wasn't his ID. It was something else, taped underneath. She pulled it free and unwrapped it, a small flash drive sealed tight with waterproof resin. She met Briggs's gaze. "Jake left this on him," she said. "Whatever got him killed, he trusted Tempest to carry it." Briggs's jaw tensed. "You think he knew he was being followed?" Maddie didn't answer. Her mind was already racing. There was a reason Jake didn't go to the department, a reason he didn't call her. He'd gone rogue. And now, whatever he was chasing had come to collect its debt. She looked back at Tempest. The dog sat still, eyes fixed on her like he was waiting for a command only she could give. A memory surged, her own K9, Rook, barking frantically in a smoke-filled stairwell, nudging her broken body, refusing to leave her behind even as the world burned. She swallowed hard. "I'm taking him with me." Briggs hesitated. "That's not protocol." "Neither is using a K9 as a dead drop." He exhaled through his nose. "Fine, but be careful, Castle. If Jake was onto something big and they know you were close—" "They'll come for me too," she finished. "Yeah, I know." Tempest stood beside her now, silent and ready. Maddie looked down at him, a protector without a partner, a soldier without a war. Not anymore. "Would you like to move on to an affair revealed?" The apartment was barely lit, the weak afternoon sun bleeding through gauzy curtains and painting the dust in gold. Maddie stood still in Jake Holloway's living room, her eyes sweeping across a space that looked less like a home and more like a battlefield paused mid-chaos. It hadn't been officially searched yet. Briggs had pulled strings to give her a head start, off the record. She figured she had an hour before internal affairs came kicking down the door, and less than that before her own sense of detachment unravelled. Tempest stayed by the door, tail still, head tilted. The silence between them was different now. Less like tension, more like a truce. Maddie moved toward the cluttered desk in the corner. Files, loose paper, a torn photograph. She picked it up. Half of it had been burned, edges singed black, but the surviving portion showed Jake at a bar, arm draped around someone just out of frame. She flipped it over. One word, Ash. And a date. Just 2 weeks ago. She paused. Ash. It was a name from another life. Ashlyn Hart, Internal Affairs. Former friend. Former something else. Maddie hadn't seen her in over a year. Not since the hearing that rubber-stamped her medical retirement. Ash had testified on Maddie's behalf. Then disappeared. Maddie sifted through a stack of Jake's notes beside the photo. Most were coded, jargon-heavy shorthand she half recognized from their academy days. But a single sheet stood out. Neat handwriting. A different tone. "He's getting reckless. Won't stop digging. I tried to warn him. If anything happens, you know where to look. Don't trust anyone wearing a badge without scars." No signature. Maddie sat down hard on the couch, heart pounding. If Jake and Ash had been involved, it wasn't just personal. It was dangerous. Because Ashlyn knew how the department worked, how people buried things without leaving fingerprints, and she'd warned Jake. Too late. Maddie's phone vibrated. Unknown number. Again. She hesitated, then answered. "Maddie." A voice she hadn't heard in 14 months. Warm. Precise, detached. "Ash," Maddie said, standing slowly. "You're alive." A faint pause. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic. You were sleeping with him." Another silence. "I tried to keep him safe," Ash said quietly, "but he wouldn't stop. He found something big, something that connects back to you." "To me? Your name's on the ledger, Maddie. Not yours exactly, your call sign. Handler. It's a ghost signature on 4 sealed ops files. Jake was trying to trace the money trail. He got close." The pieces began to shift in Maddie's head. Money, betrayal, Jake's paranoia, and now her own name entangled in it. "You should have told me," Maddie said. "I wanted to. But if I had, you'd be dead too." The line clicked dead. Maddie stared at her phone, breath caught in her throat. Then she looked at Tempest. The past wasn't just resurfacing, it was implicating her. Someone wanted her out of the way. Maybe they always had. Jake's death wasn't just a warning, it was a diversion. And Ash? Ash had slipped right through the cracks. But she'd left Maddie a thread, and Maddie was going to pull it. "Would you like to continue with Chapter 5? Chapter 5, the Lieutenant's Ledger." The night air outside Lieutenant Soren Tate's townhouse was quiet. Too quiet for the part of the city that usually buzzed with nightlife and tension. Maddie knew better. The silence didn't mean safety. It meant the street was holding its breath. She crouched beside a hedge, Tempest at her side, the dog's ears flicked forward in anticipation, body still as stone. Maddie had been watching the house for nearly an hour. No lights, no movement. According to his neighbours, Tate hadn't been home in days. But his car was here. And she knew Soren, former tactical commander, master of playing two sides, and the man who once told her during a training drill that paperwork is where the bodies are buried. She crept up the walkway, picked the lock in under 20 seconds, and eased the front door open. The air inside smelled of sweat, old takeout, and something acrid, burned electronics. Someone had tried to erase a trail. Badly. The living room was cluttered, but Maddie's eyes went straight to the den. The desk drawer was half open. A trail of shredded paper led toward a small metal bin, still smouldering. But what caught her eye was the floorboard beneath the desk, pried loose. She knelt and reached inside. Her fingers brushed something cool, metal. A thin file box, locked but hastily. She popped it open with a hairpin. Inside, a worn leather-bound ledger, pages crammed with handwritten notes, numbers, and acronyms that sent a chill down Maddie's spine. There were dates, case numbers, disposition codes, seized narcotics, arrest reports, and then a second column. Unofficial transfers, vanishing evidence, recovered cash that never made it to evidence lockup. The amounts weren't small. Thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, had vanished off the books, and every fourth or fifth page had a 3-letter stamp in red ink, K9. Next to it, a single name or call sign. Her stomach dropped as she flipped to the most recent entry. Handler 47K narcotics bust, Ridgewood. Status, redacted. Her call sign, her raid, the one that ended with her leg shattered and Rook dead. No, she whispered. Her hands trembled as she flipped back further. More K9 ops, more missing money. Jake's name appeared on several, so did Soren's. Suddenly, it all began to make sense. Jake had stumbled onto something hidden in plain sight, an entire operation laundering dirty money through the very unit they'd trusted. The K9 division, Maddie realized, was perfect for it. Dogs didn't talk. Handlers operated in the grey, often off-script. Seized evidence could vanish in moments of chaos, and no one would question a decorated officer with a loyal dog at their side. Soren Tate hadn't just been involved, he'd been managing it. And then Maddie saw it. A sticky note tucked behind the ledger's back flap, scrawled on it, "If anything happens to me, it's all in the cage." The cage? A sound behind her made her freeze. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Maddie silently slid the ledger into her coat and reached for her sidearm. Tempest stiffened, his muscles tensing. She didn't wait to see who it was. She moved fast through the back exit and into the alley, Tempest right behind her. By the time she reached her SUV, her pulse was pounding, and the pieces were snapping into place faster than she could process them. Jake had hidden something else, something bigger. And the cage, it wasn't a metaphor. It was a location, a place only they would understand. She put the SUV into gear and peeled out into the night, the ledger pressed to her chest like it might burn a hole through her ribs. Someone had framed her. Someone was still watching, and now Maddie had the one thing they were willing to kill for. Chapter 6. Ghosts from the Cage. The old K9 training facility on the edge of town had been condemned for nearly a year, but Maddie's body remembered every inch of it. As she pulled up beside the rusted gate, wind stirred dry leaves across the gravel. The compound looked forgotten, chain-link fence sagging, signs faded to illegibility, but to Maddie it pulsed with memory. This was where her story had begun, and where in some ways it had ended. Tempest whined low beside her as she stepped out, ears pricked forward. He remembered it too. The ghosts here didn't just haunt Maddie, they haunted the dogs who'd once lived and bled in these kennels. She moved quickly, flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the dusk. The main building stood crooked, its roof half caved from a storm last winter. But the underground storage facility, the cage, was still intact. Most people didn't know it existed. It was where high-risk K9s were isolated, where damaged gear went to die, and where Maddie had once been locked in during a disciplinary review she never forgot. The keypad at the rear access was dead. She bypassed it with a crowbar and muscle, the door groaning open like a reluctant memory. Inside, the temperature dropped. Concrete corridors stretched ahead, walls lined with kennels, empty now but still bearing nameplates like tombstones. She found it halfway down the hallway. Cage 7, Tempest. The cage where Jake had kept his first dog after a nervous breakdown. Maddie remembered the drama, the arguments with superiors, the whispered rumors that Jake was covering something up even then. It hadn't made sense at the time. Now it clicked. She opened the latch, heart pounding. Inside was a torn mat, a dented food dish, and beneath it, a false panel. Maddie pried it up with a screwdriver from her boot. A soft click, and there it was. A weatherproof container, no larger than a lunchbox, sealed with military-grade latches. She opened it slowly. Inside, a second flash drive. A thick stack of printed documents, all bearing department headers. Photos, grainy, zoomed-in surveillance shots of officers exchanging cash behind patrol cars. One of them was Soren Tate. Another was a face she hadn't expected. Captain Briggs. She staggered back. Briggs, the man who gave her access. The one who seemed like he was still on her side. Jake had documented everything. The drive was labelled K9 Burn, Master Copy. Maddie swallowed. This wasn't just about stolen money. This was systemic, organised. Going back years. And she was in the centre of it, whether she liked it or not. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned fast, gun up. A figure stood at the end of the corridor, silhouetted by the failing daylight behind the open door. Not moving. Then, "You were always too curious, Castle." "Ash," Maddie didn't lower the weapon. "You tipped me off. I gave you a nudge. You weren't supposed to open the whole damn thing." Ash stepped into the corridor, face sharp, eyes unreadable. She wasn't holding a weapon. Not yet. Maddie's voice was ice. "You knew about Briggs." "I suspected, but if he's involved..." Ash's jaw tensed. "Then no one's safe, least of all you." Maddie held up the flash drive. "This is enough to burn the whole department down." "Exactly," Ash said. "That's why they'll kill you before you leave this place." A distant engine rumbled outside. Maddie swore. "They followed you?" Ash didn't answer. Tempest growled low. Maddie stuffed the drive and documents into her jacket. "We're not dying in this tomb." Ash moved to block the door. "Move," Maddie said. Ash hesitated. Then, just barely, stepped aside. "If you make it out of here, go to someone outside the system. Someone who hasn't been compromised. And Maddie?" She turned back, gun still raised. Ash's voice softened. "Don't trust the badge. Trust the dog." Tempest barked once. Sharp, urgent. Outside, headlights appeared through the trees. Maddie ran. "Would you like to move forward with Chapter 7? Maddie didn't stop driving until the city skyline was a blur in the rear-view mirror. The folder of evidence seat-belted beside her like a passenger she couldn't shake. Tempest sat rigid in the back seat, panting low, sensing the rising storm. She didn't have to say it out loud. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about every badge she'd ever trusted. She turned off the highway and pulled into an abandoned lot on the edge of the city industrial zone. It was one of their old drop points, neutral ground from back in the day. Maddie parked beneath a dead street lamp and killed the lights. Then she called Briggs. "Castle." His voice came sharp, controlled. "Where the hell are you?" "I found the cage." A pause. And you're in the files." Another silence, heavier this time. "I trusted you," she said, her voice tight. "Jake did too." Briggs sighed, slow, resigned. "Jake went too far. He wasn't supposed to dig that deep." "So it's true." "No," Briggs said softly. "It's worse." Maddie's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Why? You think this is about cash?" His voice hardened. "This goes back to Homeland Ops, post-9/11 black funds, off-the-books enforcement tactics. When the money dried up, someone kept the machine running, with street seizures, fabricated busts, ghost accounts. It was national security until it wasn't. And now it's just greed." Briggs didn't deny it. Maddie leaned her head back against the seat. "Jake died trying to stop it." Briggs was quiet. Then, "And you'll die if you try to finish it." She hung up. Her pulse thundered as she sat in the dark. The system she had once served with pride was now a hydra, one head cut off only for another to grow. And the man who had vouched for her reinstatement? He'd been at the centre the whole time. She looked at Tempest through the rearview mirror. He knew about Jake, maybe even gave the order. Tempest whined softly. Suddenly a thud against the windshield snapped her to attention. She ducked, pistol drawn, eyes scanning. Then a badge slammed against the glass. Crimson smeared across the gold. Blood. She kicked open the door and rolled out, crouched behind the car. Across the lot, a figure stumbled toward her, collapsing halfway. Ash. Maddie ran to her side, heart hammering. Blood soaked through Ash's blazer, a deep gash across her ribs. "They found me," she gasped. "Tried to make it look like a carjacking." Maddie pressed pressure to the wound. "Who sent them?" Ash coughed, eyes glassy. "Your friend, Briggs. He's tying off loose ends." Ash nodded weakly. "They're burning everything. Files, witnesses, me. You're next." Not if I get to him first. Ash reached into her coat, hand shaking, and handed Maddie a key. Locker 312, Union Rail Station. I left a copy. Get it to someone outside. Feds, press. I don't care. Maddie took the key, jaw clenched. You're going to live? Ash gave a small, bitter laugh. Don't lie to a dying woman. Ash's head sagged. Maddie knelt beside her for a long moment, then whispered, I'll finish it. Sirens screamed faintly in the distance. Maddie stood, adrenaline pumping cold through her veins. There was only one way to end this. She had to bring down a man wearing the same badge she once bled for. Would you like to continue with Chapter 8? Chapter 8, Double Cross and Detention. Union Rail Station was half deserted by the time Maddie slipped inside, the echo of distant announcements bouncing off concrete walls and flickering fluorescent lights. She kept her head down, hoodie drawn, the locker key clutched in her palm like a trigger. Tempest padded beside her in sync, unnervingly quiet for such a big animal. He hadn't barked since Ash died. Maybe he understood, in the way only those who've survived war do. Locker 3112 was tucked in the far corridor near the shuttered cafe. She inserted the key, heart pounding, and swung the door open. Inside was a black flash drive, plain, unlabeled. But Maddie knew this was Jake's insurance, what Ash had died to protect. As she pocketed the drive, she heard the sound that made her blood freeze. Boots, heavy, purposeful. She turned. 4 officers, uniform, weapons drawn. At the centre, Captain Briggs. Maddie Castle, he said calmly. You're under arrest for obstruction, theft of departmental property, and the suspected murder of Agent Ashlyn Hart. She didn't flinch. She bled out trying to save what's left of your soul. You're the one who... You've been unstable for years, Castle. Everyone knew it. The leg, the dog, the pills. You were a tragedy waiting to happen. Tempest growled. One of the officers raised a taser. Briggs waved him off. Sedate the dog. We'll bag them both. Maddie's gun was already out, but before she could fire, the world went sideways. Taser prongs struck her in the ribs, and pain shot through her body like white fire. She collapsed, muscles locking, vision swimming. Tempest lunged, but another dart hit him square in the flank. He yelped and crumpled beside her, his body twitching. Briggs stepped into her field of view, crouched beside her. I told you not to dig. He plucked the flash drive from her pocket. Don't worry, he said with a smirk. We'll take good care of your legacy. Then, darkness. When she woke, her wrists were cuffed to a metal ring in the floor of a bare room. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead drilled into her skull. She wasn't in a jail. She was in a black site, off the books, off the grid. No windows, no phone call, no lawyer. Across from her, Tempest lay sedated in a cage, breathing shallowly. Maddie's rage flared so hot she had to shut her eyes just to stay sane. A door opened. Someone stepped inside. Not Briggs. It was Detective Raphael Quinn, Internal Affairs, recently suspended. Maddie remembered him from a training seminar years ago. Sharp eyes, sharper conscience. He looked worse for wear, bandaged hand, bruise blooming under his eye, but very much alive. Don't talk, he said, tossing a small mic jammer on the table. Just listen. He knelt beside her and produced a second flash drive. Identical. I copied it before Ash called you. Maddie stared at him, stunned. She trusted you, Quinn said. She didn't trust me, but we both knew Briggs was going to burn this whole city down to protect himself. Why help me now? Because someone has to. He unlocked her cuffs. You've got one shot. Take Briggs down before he buries everything. The evidence, the witnesses, the dogs, all of it. What about Tempest? I'll get him out. You go get justice. Maddie stood on shaky legs, adrenaline pushing her forward. As she reached the door, Quinn added, one more thing. She turned. Briggs isn't working alone. You're hunting a hydra, Castle. When you cut off one head, you'd better be ready for the next one to bite back. Chapter 9. The Handler Becomes the Hunted. The city felt different now, like a stage rigged with explosives, and Maddie Castle was standing dead center, with Briggs branding her a rogue cop, murderer and thief. Her face was all over internal bulletins. Every patrol unit was given her photo. Every off-duty officer had orders. Shoot on sight if she resists. She had become the enemy of the very system she once swore to defend. But Maddie wasn't hiding anymore. She moved through the underbelly of the city with purpose. Half-remembered alleys, safe houses used by narcotics teams, hidden lockers filled with burner phones and backup gear. Tempest, still recovering from sedation, limped slightly at her side, a quiet shadow of fury. At every turn, Maddie was a step ahead of her pursuers. She hacked into the precinct's secure comms through an old contact in cybercrimes, monitored their patrol rotations, set traps, false leads, and all the while she was building a case, one that couldn't be denied. The flash drive Quinn had given her? Explosive. It didn't just implicate Briggs. It tied together 5 separate departments, over a dozen decorated officers, and linked their ghost cash laundering scheme to high-level political donors and a sitting federal judge. And the worst part? Every piece had been sanitized, paperwork fabricated, witnesses disappeared, dogs like Rook used as props, then put down when they saw too much. Maddie had enough to set fire to the system, but Briggs had an ace left to play. She saw it on the news. Former K9 officer Castle responsible for deadly bombing outside precinct storage facility, the anchor said, eyes solemn. Surveillance footage, grainy and doctored, showed a woman kind of like her tossing a duffel bag and walking away. Then the explosion. Briggs had crossed the final line, framing her as a terrorist. He wasn't just trying to arrest her anymore. He was trying to erase her. The net tightened. Quinn's contact was found dead in a dumpster. One of Maddie's old patrol partners was shot during a supposed confrontation at a coffee shop. Even Ash's death was now being spun as a tragic suicide. Every truth Maddie touched was being smothered, and then the final blow came. Tempest was taken. She'd left him with a rescue vet outside the city, secure, hidden, but when she arrived that night, the place was gutted, blood on the floor. A note pinned to the kennel, "You want your dog? Come home." It was signed with a paw print. Maddie's hands trembled, but not with fear. This wasn't a war anymore. It was personal. And as she stood in the ruins of that shelter, rage blazing behind her eyes, she knew what had to be done. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to bring the fight to them, to Briggs, to every rotten badge behind him. She slipped a bullet into the chamber, holstered her sidearm, and whispered to the night, "You came for the handler. Now the handler can." Chapter 10. A final command. Rain hammered the rooftop of the downtown precinct like drumfire as Maddie crouched in the shadows across the street, eyes locked on the 3rd floor, Captain Briggs' office. Lights on, curtains drawn. He was inside, waiting. The message had been simple. Midnight. Come alone, or the dog dies. She hadn't responded. She didn't need to. This was her endgame. Tempest was somewhere in that building, alive if Briggs still thought her emotions made her weak. That was his final mistake. She wasn't here to plead. She wasn't here for mercy. She was here to finish it. Maddie slipped through a side entrance using an old access badge, one she'd kept when no one was looking, back when she was still clinging to rules that no longer applied. She moved like a ghost, disabling cameras, cutting hall feeds, evading patrols that might have once saluted her. She made it to the K9 wing first. The cages were empty, except one. Tempest. He perked up as she approached, tail wagging, then growling when a footstep sounded behind her. Briggs. Dressed in full dress blues, as if the uniform could hide the rot beneath. He held a suppressed pistol and a smirk. "You really thought you could burn me down with a flash drive?" Maddie didn't answer. She was already moving. Gunfire erupted in the confined space. One shot missed. Hers didn't. Briggs dropped to a knee, blood blooming across his shoulder. "End of the line, Captain." Briggs wheezed a bitter laugh. "You think this ends with me? You'll be hunted until you're nothing but a cautionary tale, a broken dog handler who snapped." Maddie stepped closer, fury shaking her voice. "I didn't break. I survived, and I'm not leaving a trail of silence behind me." She tossed a USB onto the ground beside him. "That's already in the hands of the press and the feds." Briggs' face twisted. Tempest growled from his cage, eyes locked on him. Maddie opened the cage. Tempest bolted past her, not to attack, but to stand beside her. Still waiting. Briggs raised his weapon. Maddie didn't blink. "Tempest, hold." The dog froze, every muscle coiled. Briggs's gun trembled. "You won't shoot. You're not like me." "No," she said. "I'm worse. Because I remember." She fired. One shot. Non-lethal. Briggs dropped, unconscious. Sirens wailed in the distance. She had uploaded the full drive to 3 separate media outlets using Quinn's encrypted network. The files were already trending. The scandal had detonated across every screen in the city. Names, photos, financials, everything. They couldn't silence it now. Maddie turned to Tempest, rain soaking them both as they emerged into the street. People began to gather as officers poured from cruisers, weapons drawn, but they didn't shoot. Because for the first time, the truth was louder than the orders. And Maddie Castle? She didn't raise her hands in surrender. She raised them to scratch the ears of a loyal K9 who had never once betrayed her. Tempest barked once, sharp, proud. And behind them, the precinct that had buried so many secrets finally began to collapse. Maddie didn't return to the force. She started a K9 rehabilitation centre with Quinn. For dogs like Tempest, for handlers like herself, broken but not beaten. The department was gutted, restructured. Briggs was tried. Others followed. Some disappeared before charges could land. The city didn't thank her, but it remembered. And in the quiet fields outside town, where dogs trained for second chances, a simple plaque read, "To the fallen and those who refuse to stay down."